Hey, this is Anney.
And Samantha.
And welcome to Stuff Mom Never Told You, a production of iHeartRadio. So today, Samantha, I want to ask you, do you have any award that you are particularly proud of receiving?
Well, I can't really say. I don't think I've gotten any awards outside of school.
You can use those.
But I'm like, that's a shame.
You know what? We can fix that. I will make an award for you.
Thank you. I'm trying to figure out if I ever really have. I don't think so. Oh, that makes me so sad.
But I was thinking this would be really funny, like a school thing.
Okay.
It could be.
Well, I definitely got the most dependable because I think that was just a popularity show. Like they just threw out names for people to be, superlatives.
Right.
So mine was most dependable, which I don't know what that means for a high schooler. If that's like you're the biggest nerd or, whatnot. I got some drama awards. Got tons of accelerated reader stuff in middle school. God, I'm boring. I think I just try to hide away to try to blend in with the school for the most part. But what about you?
Yeah. I say a lot. I was very competitive. So I got a lot of academic awards, accelerated reader awards. And I think what was I voted as in high school? Most likely it was a weird one, like be a millionaire or I don't know.
Millionaire?
Yeah. It was something like that. I can't remember if it was that specifically or it was something like successful, be successful.
Okay. Most likely to succeed?
Something along those lines. Who can remember anymore?
Wow.
Yeah, and I got some trophies from gymnastics that I was really proud of because, trophies were cool. I had a specific one I was going to talk about, and it's out of my head. Now you've got me thinking in high school terms. But for this episode, we're talking about something bigger than accelerated reader. We are talking about the Nobel Prize, specifically perhaps the Nobel Peace Prize. And because it is Black History Month, we wanted to focus on Black women within this world. And certainly we have talked about some of these women in our Female First series. So we'll try to highlight those where they are, but you can check that out if you want to learn more about them.
Yep.
And there has been some news around Nobel Prizes and women in the past year. So today is February 10th, 2021, just in case.
Just in case.
Just in case. In 2020, Jennifer A. Doudna and Emmanuel Charpentier won a Nobel Prize in chemistry for their development of CRISPR, or CRISPR, Cas9 gene editing tools. And this was the first time that women received this award without a male collaborator. First time. They were only the 6th and 7th women to win this award since 1901.
Right. And great news. But why? Why did it take it so long? So in 2018, the Swedish Royal Academy of Science launched initiatives to be more inclusive, including keeping gender and geography in mind when nominating and asking more women to send in nominations. Yes, that academy is in charge of the Nobel Prizes. But the progress hasn't exactly been as much as we hoped, not surprisingly. For instance, in 2019, only 20 women received the award in the sciences. That's out of 600. The Nobel Prize also got caught up in the #MeToo movement, so that is something to think on as well. So physics professor at the University of Copenhagen, Liselott Joffred, along with some colleagues, investigated and found that even accounting for the historical lower number of women in scientific fields, women are underrepresented. Surprise, surprise. According to Joffred, quote, with 95% probability, there is a bias against women. Not surprisingly.
Yeah, so she was specifically looking into, because some people would argue, there just weren't that many women in the sciences, so that's why they were getting less awards. And it's changing as more and more women get into the scientific field. But Joffred specifically looked into that and found even taking in that, it's still...
Right.
Right. This bias is still there. So let's talk about some basics around the Nobel Prize. The Nobel Foundation was a private organization established in 1900, and it was founded as a way to honor the will of Alfred Nobel and use his fortune accordingly. The foundation's primary goal is to ensure the financial stability of the institutions that hand out the award and also to protect the independence of these institutions when it comes to picking out winners. In his will, Nobel specifically named the institutions he wanted to be involved. So this is from the Nobel website. The Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences for the Nobel Prize in Physics and Chemistry, Karolinska Institutet for the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine, the Swedish Academy for the Nobel Prize in Literature, and a committee of 5 persons to be elected by the Norwegian Parliament, Storting for the Nobel Peace Prize. And then in 1968, the Sveriges Riksbank Prize in Economic Sciences in memory of Alfred Nobel was established. And the following year, the Swedish Academy of Sciences was put in charge of choosing the laureates in economic sciences.
So, how do you get nominated? I'm going to have to write this down for you,
It's
Anney,
time,
okay?
yeah.
You ready? Well, sorry, you can't nominate yourself.
Blast.
No, just can't happen. And no posthumous awards, which is kind of sad. And the full list of nominated names isn't released until 50 years have passed. So beginning in September, the Nobel Committee calls for submissions from professors, past recipients, scientists, members of academia and academies, parliamentary committee members, and others to send in their nominations with the goal of receiving a diverse swath of nominees. From there, the Nobel Committee selects the winners. While some committees require nominators to be qualified, anyone can nominate someone other than themselves for the Nobel Peace Prize.
Right. So I think, for instance, the literature, you have to be involved somehow in the world of literature to nominate someone.
Right.
But for the Nobel Peace Prize, pretty much anybody can.
Everybody.
Yeah, exactly.
So some quick stats. 57 women have won the Nobel Prize between 1901 and 1920. Marie Curie is the only woman to receive the award twice, once in 1903 for physics and a second time in 1911 for chemistry. And so women have been the recipient of the award 58 times. Okay. So Curie was also the first woman to win the prize. And not surprisingly, the number has gone up since 2000, with 28 women winning the award from 2000 to 2020, as compared to the 4 between 1901 to 1920. And of the 931 laureates, women only make up about 6.1%. And these numbers exclude institutions.
Right. So that's pretty small.
That is ridiculously small.
Yeah. So of those awards that women have won, 17 have been Nobel Peace Prizes. From the Nobel website, here are the winners. Nadia Murad in 2018, quote, for their relief efforts to end the use of sexual violence as a weapon of war and armed conflict. Malala Yousafzai in 2014 for their struggle against the suppression of children and young people and for the right of all children to education. Ellen Johnson Sirleaf in 2011 for their nonviolent struggle for the safety of women and for women's rights to full participation in peace-building work. Leymah Gbowee in 2011 for their nonviolent struggle for the safety of women and for women's rights to full participation in peace-building work. Tawakkol Karman in 2011 for their nonviolent struggle for the safety of women and for women's rights to full participation in peace-building work. Wangari Maathai in 2004 for her contribution to sustainable development, democracy, and peace. Shirin Ebadi in 2003 for her efforts for democracy and human rights. She has focused especially on the struggle for the rights of women and children. Jody Williams in 1997 for their work for the banning and clearing of anti-personnel mines. Rigoberta Menchú-Tum in 1992 in recognition of her work for social justice and ethno-cultural reconciliation based on respect for the rights of indigenous peoples. Aung San Suu Kyi in 1991 for her nonviolent struggle for democracy and human rights. And then a few don't have reasons listed next to their name. Alva Myrdal in 1982 played a central role in the United Nations disarmament negotiations. Mother Teresa in 1979 worked for the poor in Calcutta through her order, the Missionaries of Charity. Betty Williams in 1976 founded a grassroots movement against violence in Northern Ireland. Myred Corrigan in 1976 founded a grassroots movement against violence in Northern Ireland. Emily Green Bach in 1946 leader of the American Peace Movement. Jane Addams in 1931, social worker active in the peace movement. And Baroness Bertha Sophie Felicia von Suttner in 1905, leader in the international peace movement. So all those descriptions I read, those are directly from the Nobel website. Yes. And a lot of these women have dealt with sexism and sometimes extreme sexism, obstacles in their path, sometimes even violence. The road has not been easy for a lot of them. And we thought we would highlight two of these women in our history segment. But first, we're going to pause for a quick break for a word from our sponsor. And we're back. Thank you, sponsor.
So let's talk about Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, who is known as Africa's Iron Lady. When Sirleaf was elected as president of Liberia in 2005, 2 years after the end of the country's violent civil war that left upwards of 200,000 dead and hundreds of thousands more displaced, she made history as the first democratically elected head of state in Africa. She served in the transitional government before her election on the Governance Reform Commission, which spearheaded the country's anti-corruption reforms. From 2006 to 2012, she increased the nation's national budget from $80 million to $672 million and secured a yearly growth in GDP of 7%. And in 2011, she was reelected.
All of this was after years she spent working in office. She was born in Liberia in 1938, and she obtained her upper education in the U.S. beginning in 1961 from Harvard University and Madison's Business College in Wisconsin. Her career in politics began in 1965 when she worked in Liberia's Treasury Department. She rose through the ranks, becoming the Minister of Finance in 1979, the first female to hold that position, with the main goal of taking on the mismanagement of the country's finances. She briefly served as the president of the Liberian Bank for Development and Investment after the military coup in 1980. But as the regime became more oppressive, she fled the country that same year. In the ensuing years, she held many positions at a handful of banks, including acting as a senior loan officer at the World Bank. She also worked with the UN as the assistant administrator of the United Nations Development Program and as director of its Regional Bureau of Africa, which put her at the rank of Assistant Secretary General of the UN, a position she resigned from in 1997. Through her efforts contesting the coup and following elections in Liberia, she was imprisoned for a year, and her life was threatened by one of Liberia's former presidents.
During her time in office, she helmed reconciliation efforts, including rebuilding the country's economy, dealt with the Ebola crisis, though she came under fire for quarantining heavily infected poor areas with troops, and garnered several accolades for her economic and social policies and for her efforts towards empowering women, including the Nobel Peace Prize in 2011 and the Presidential Medal of Freedom. She was also the first female recipient for the Mo Ibrahim Prize for the Achievement in African Leadership. Sirleaf was appointed co-chair of the United Nations Secretary General's high-level panel of eminent persons on the post-2005 development agenda in 2012, and she became the first woman elected as chairperson of the Economic Community of West African States in 2016. She's also been given 15 honorary degrees. I need one.
Yeah, 15. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
My mom, so brief aside, I didn't go to my graduation. When I graduated college, I had no interest in going.
Me either.
And my parents, they were both relieved because it's Atlanta in summer.
Right.
And didn't really want to do that, but kind of like sad. And then I think a couple years ago, my mom asked me out of the blue, "Where's your diploma?" And I said, "I don't know." And she was so mad. And she called the school and made them send me the diploma and got it framed. But I probably never would have. I had the little card one, you know, that they gave for your wallet. I'm going to whip that out in front of people.
I think I may have lost both of them. My mother did frame mine as well because I also did not go to my graduation. I was like, I don't care about this. I'm going to go to Europe instead because it was cheap and free. And I need to do this before I get a job.
Yeah.
And also because UGA, it's a giant, giant school. And you could go to the big one where you don't actually stand up, or you could go to the smaller one in your class. But it was just I'm fine. And my mother decided to make that frame for me. And I had to take it out because I don't think I ever received a card one, small card one, to prove that I had gone to college and gotten a degree. And now I can't find it. Oh. Sorry, Mom.
Sorry, moms all around. We appreciate it. Well, we don't have 15 honorary degrees Ellen Johnson Sirleaf does, is the point. From the UN website, President Sirleaf has been ranked among the top 100 most powerful women in the world, Forbes 2012, and the most powerful women in Africa, Forbes Africa 2011, one of 6 Women of the Year, Glamour 2010. among the 10 best leaders in the world, Newsweek 2010, and top 10 female leaders, Time 2010. And also in 2010, The Economist called her, quote, the best president the country has ever had. In 2012, she published her memoir entitled This Child Will Be Great. She stepped down as president in 2017, and she was criticized for corruption and cronyism. She appointed many family members to government positions, and of the 19 candidates that ran to replace her, only one was a woman. So people were like, how good of a job did you do empowering women if this is the case? And also, well, it's just very complicated, the whole situation in that country and what she was dealing with, because you'll find articles saying, well, she inherited this thing and what was she going to do? And then you'll find other articles saying, well, there's just signs of corruption and it wasn't changing. And then a lot of people say, but she did step down. So like this democratic process took place and she stepped down and allowed for it to happen again. And that's a big deal. But her legacy is not without complications, is the point. It's very complicated. But she did achieve a lot in the face of many obstacles.
I think you and I have talked about this before, but it's really hard to see, like, you want to celebrate everything, but there are always a little bit of but.
At least a little bit of but.
And that's complicated, but it doesn't negate the fact that she did make some huge changes. So now let's talk about Leymah Gbowee, who received a Nobel Peace Prize in 2011 as well, also for her work in Liberia. Over the years, she's been a peace activist, a social worker, and as an advocate of women's rights. On top of that, she served as founder and president of the Monrovia-based Gbowee Peace Foundation Africa. Through her work in bringing together Christian and Muslim women, she was able to help end the Liberian Civil War in 2003, which in turn helped clear the path for Ellen Sirleaf's election in 2005. Her efforts played a role in kickstarting a cascade of movements that recognize the power and effectiveness of women when it comes to achieving lasting peace.
Gbowee was born in Liberia in 1972, and the Civil War broke out in that country when Gbowee was only 17. And in her words, quote, turned her from a child to an adult in a matter of hours. She became a mother young and started working as a social worker and a trauma counselor, specifically focusing on child soldiers. And as she gained more experience, she came to believe that women needed to take on this responsibility to ensure peace for generations to come. So she founded and served as the Liberia coordinator of the Women in Peacebuilding Network under the West Africa Network for Peacebuilding. After a second civil war erupted in 1999, bringing with it systemic rape, Gbowee put her beliefs into action. Guided in part by her Christian faith, she helped form a previously unheard of coalition with Muslim women, the Women of Liberia Mass Action for Peace. Under Gbowee's leadership, thousands of women showed up for mass protests that lasted weeks. The leader at the time, President Charles Taylor, was forced to meet up with them for peace negotiations that took place in Ghana. And this was with a delegation that Gbowee led. At one point, when the talks stalled, 200 women, led by Gbowee, formed a human barrier preventing the president's representatives and rebel warlords from leaving until they came to a peace agreement. When security forces showed up to remove the women, Gbowee threatened to take off her clothes, an act that, according to traditional beliefs, would set a curse upon these men, a misfortune upon these men. And they didn't want that, so they returned to the negotiations. That's very effective. Quick thinking. Weeks later, President Taylor resigned and went into exile, and a transitional government was guaranteed by a signed peace treaty.
My kind of lady right there. Gbowee co-founded the Ghana-based Women, Peace and Security Network Africa, and she went on to serve on their executive board for 6 years. And this is a Pan-African nonprofit organization that's focused on women and led by women with the goal of increasing women's participation in Africa's strategic security and peaceful governance. One of the ways they go about this is by offering leadership programs for women, which is phenomenal. And in 2012, she founded the Gbowee Peace Foundation Africa in Monrovia with the mission of making leadership and educational opportunities for girls and women. And she served as a member of the Nobel Women's Initiative, the Gbowee Peace Foundation, and African Women Leaders Network for Reproductive Health and Family Planning, among several others. As you can tell, she's led a lot of things.
Yeah.
She does a lot of work around sustainability as well, because, add one more thing. Why not?
Yeah, I saw a lot of that popping up as well. And yeah, she's received countless awards. She was the subject of the 2008 documentary Pray the Devil Back to Hell, which was highly praised, and the 2011 memoir Mighty Be Our Powers. After Wangari Maathai, who we did a whole female first episode on with our friend Eves, Sirleaf and Gbowee are the second and third African women to receive the Nobel Peace Prize.
Nice.
Yeah, again, want to celebrate, but still, it's taking so long.
The fact that it took till 2004 for the first Black woman to be able to be given this prize is absurd. And to this day, the number is still ridiculously low.
Yes. But we did want to highlight these women. And as we say in Female First, people's legacies are complicated and these women are still alive. So things are ongoing, but they've accomplished a lot and worth talking about. That's what we have to say about them for now. But we do have a little bit more current news in the world of Nobel Peace Prize. But first, we're going to pause for one more quick break for a word from our sponsor. And we're back. Thank you, sponsor. One of the reasons we started looking at the history of the Nobel Peace Prize is because of a couple of this year's nominations for Stacey Abrams and for Black Lives Matter. Stacey Abrams was nominated by Norwegian lawmaker Lars Haltbrekken for her work in, quote, promoting nonviolent change via the ballot box. He stated in his nomination letter, quote, Abrams' work follows in Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s footsteps in the fight for equality before the law and for civil rights, and continues on to say, Abrams' efforts to complete King's work are crucial if the United States of America shall succeed in its effort to create fraternity between all peoples and a peaceful and just society. She's being recognized for her tireless efforts for fighting voter suppression and helping to amplify the voices of marginalized citizens and communities.
Right. And I was trying to find a reaction from her or even from Verified Action, and I could not find anything. I don't know if they're like, okay, cool, and just moving on, or whether it's because it's such a large list. And as we talked about earlier, you never know who's going to actually pay attention and whether it's going to be noted or not. So, yeah. When she says something, we'll say something. Sure. And then there's Black Lives Matter, which has been nominated this year as well. And they were nominated by the Norwegian lawmaker Petter Eide. He nominated Black Lives Matter because it would, quote, send a powerful message that peace is founded on equality, solidarity, and human rights, and that all countries must respect those basic principles. And in his letter, he states, quote, BLM's call for systemic change has spread around the world, forcing other countries to grapple with racism within their own societies. And in crediting their work, he stated in a TV interview, I believe that Black Lives Matter is the largest and strongest social movement in the world today, fighting racial injustice.
There are some people who feel this is just a political ploy of an organization, perhaps using a movement to stay relevant. And, I'm not sure if we made it clear at the top, but the Nobel Prize is not without a history of controversy.
Right.
It is a bit different as the organization is made up of different chapters run from different people all over the world. Perhaps nominating the three founders, Alicia Garza, Patrisse Cullors, and Opal Tometi, for their work would have made more sense.
Yeah, I think it's going to be hard. I know there was a whole conversation within the different communities like, well, how do we do this? Because the chapters are very split. And so it's not necessarily under one. So it probably would have made more sense to put the founders as the head of that and naming them instead of one big, giant collective movement. But it definitely does make the statement of the fact that they are a movement rather than just, as some of the people in the U.S. would call, like, extremist groups. You know what I mean? So it does, I think it brings a big conversation to that. But the Black Lives Matter responded on their tweet, quote, we hold the largest social movement in global history. Today, we have been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. People are waking up to our global call for racial justice and an end to economic injustice, environmental racism, and white supremacy. We're only getting started. So definitely excited to see that. But of course, we don't know what's going to happen at the end, right?
No, not currently. So, of course, the nomination process, as we said at the beginning, does not necessarily mean they will even come close to being awarded, as thousands of people can nominate people in organizations. For example, both Jared Kushner and Donald Trump have been nominated by people from their own past staff or parties, but will not likely be considered by the Nobel Committee. That would be a real turn.
So says at least one of the committee members, that was their cut. So it'll be surprising. Maybe they will, who knows, but it did not seem likely.
I personally would be shocked. I feel confident saying that. Winners will be announced in October, so hopefully we can revisit this and we'll have some good news.
Right. Yeah, I think it's really sad that our initial idea was, let's talk about Black History Month. Let's talk about some of the women who have been awarded around the world for these amazing things that they've done, because Black women continue to be powerhouses and have been powerhouses from the beginning. And the mere fact that they're not in here. No one's in here. And it took till 2004. So when we talk about Ida B. Wells and her work, and when we talk about Bell Hooks and her works, and you start talking about what happened, why is this even a thing? Why aren't these people in this conversation?
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that it's so short, because the list is so ridiculously short. And this is exactly what we're talking about, the systemic breakdown within organizations like this, and whether or not they should be legitimately looked at as, hey, are you actually being representative of the world and what's happening in the world? Or are you just giving people that you know and you kind of like a pat on the back?
Right. And just to reiterate, for this episode, we did include numbers from Nobel Prize at large, but we were focusing on Nobel Peace Prize. So yeah, like Toni Morrison won Nobel Prize in 1993. But we did want to focus specifically on the Nobel Peace Prize. And yes, it was a depressingly short. I laugh, so it's sad.
Right.
Yeah, it is changing. It is. And I'm glad that people are looking into it and having these conversations about it.
Right.
Well, maybe one day, Samantha, I'll think about an award for you.
Okay, thank you.
I will. And listeners, we would love to hear about any awards you've received.
Yes.
You can email us at stuffmediamomstuff@iheartmedia.com. You can also find us on Twitter at momstuffpodcast or on Instagram at Stuff Mom Never Told You. Thanks as always to our super producer, Christina.
Thank you, Christina.
And thanks to you for listening. Stuff Mom Never Told You is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.